Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to be going over 10 sequels that I actually really want to read and need to read because I oftentimes don't move on to sequels. It's just not my personal cup of tea. I find that they let me down after book one, but I have comprised a list of 10 sequels that over the entire course of me being a reader, I have said I want to continue on with this series and for whatever reason have not continued on. So this list is kind of an interesting mix of some different things. I originally compiled an entire list and I had like 26 books on it. So I got rid of anything that I had an immediate plan to read. I knew when I was going to read it. I knew when I was going to get to it. And then I got rid of anything that I was like kind of iffy about. Like maybe I want to read it, maybe I don't. And that got me down to 10 sequels that I want to get to. One of which I have previously read, but earlier this year I read the first book again and really enjoyed the first book. So I want to continue on and reread the sequel and see if the sequel holds up just as well as the first one. And I guess I'll start with that one for you all. First up, I have Pandemonium by Lauren Oliver. Lauren Oliver has written many books, but the one that we are talking about right here is her Delirium series. So this is a trilogy. There are a couple of novellas. The whole entire concept of it is it's a YA dystopian where love is considered a disease, which is just such a YA dystopian theme. But I've actually found these books to be very good and very enjoyable. And even like years later, I have, as I said, gone back and reread Delirium and really liked it. I remember the first time I read Pandemonium, I gave it 5 stars. And when you look online, a lot of people felt very similarly about this book. And so I'm excited to reread it because I remember having some characters in here that I really enjoyed and some themes and concepts. And I remember it being so much better than the first one. And I enjoyed the first one. We're following a young girl. She is about to go through the surgery where she will lose the part of her brain that has the ability to love. And she is living with her aunt and her cousins because her mom never fully was able to have that thing in her brain that allowed her to love. And so the government came and took her away. Our main girl, I think her name is Lena, is scared that she's falling in love with this boy. Her last summer, kind of with emotions and feelings, decides to give in to it with her and her best friend just having a blast and meeting boys and going to parties. Lena starts to realize that things might not be as they seem, as it is always the case in YA dystopia, and so she starts to take matters into her own hands. It was an interesting book. I really like where book 2 is going to take us. I've been meaning to do it for a while now, guys, and I just need to do it. Up next, we have Heart of Flames by Nikki Pau Preto. So book 1 is about this, I believe it's like South American culture, and it's about these 2 sisters who are supposed to become Phoenix riders. And one of the sisters' Phoenixes, I don't know how to pluralize possessive that. Anyways, one of the Phoenixes unfortunately doesn't make it through the hatching process. And so it splits the 2 sisters up and it forms a rift between them. Mostly I didn't move on to book 2 for the main reason that I listened to the audiobook for book 1 and my library didn't have the audiobook for book 2 or 3. Recently, I have found out that my library now has 2 and 3. So I'd really like to continue on and read them. But I kind of feel like it's been too long because it's been about 2 or 3 years since I read book 1 that I'd probably need to start over again in order to get all of the nitty-gritty details correct. One of the things that really stood out to me in this YA fantasy series was the dark relationship between the 2 sisters. I liked how realistic it was, and I liked how they treated each other. Like, they loved each other, but they also hated each other. And it was just a really good series, and I felt like it stood out to me. It's a book that I still think about a lot, and I find that to be rare with YA fantasy. Up next, we have one that I'm not totally convinced is going to be good, especially since I rated book 1 a 2.5, but I'm curious enough to continue on, and that is Crossed by Ali Condi. So the first book is Matched. A lot of people read it a really long time ago. I reread it when I reread Delirium for a very specific video on my channel, which you can go and watch. And while I only rated it a 2.5, I felt like I wanted to continue this time, and I didn't feel that way the first time. The audiobook's really short, so I don't see why I won't just go do it. Matched is a YA dystopian all about this society where they choose everything in your life. Our main character is meeting her matching day, so it means that she's about to be matched up with the boy that she is going to be married to and live the rest of her life with. When she goes to her matching day, she matches up with a boy that she has known her entire life, which is really rare, and so when she goes to plug in the information about him to learn more about him, another boy pops up, and it is a different boy that she also knows. So she's struggling with the idea of which boy is actually supposed to be her matched, and in like all YA dystopian, she's starting to realize that the government is not exactly how she thinks it's going. It's like a guilty pleasure, except I refuse to feel guilty for enjoying a book, but then also rating that book a 2.5 because it is not that great of a book. I think the writing was kind of lacking. I think the characters were kind of lacking, but it's like watching reality TV. I couldn't look away, and I just want to know what happens next. Up next, I have Scarlet by Marissa Myers. So I originally read Lunar. Is that the first book? Anyways, I'm pretty sure that's right. A few years ago, and then I reread it once again for the same video that I have been mentioning previously in this one. I actually liked it a lot better the second time, and I was very shocked by that. And so it made me want to continue on because I have heard people say that the first book is like not the best. Like they really enjoyed it, but it's not the best, and there are better ones in the series. I don't know if I'm going to like the series after this one, and I think that if I finish up Scarlet and I'm not a huge fan, then I won't continue on with Cress or Winter, but I want to give this one a shot. So this whole entire series is a fairy tale retelling. Each book is a different fairy tale retelling. The first one is Cinderella, the second one is Little Red Riding Hood, the next one is Rapunzel, and then the last one I think is Snow White. And so they're retold in a YA sci-fi setting in a distant future where basically the moon is haunted by vampires, vampire-like creatures. I don't think they're actually called vampires, and the queen of the moon is basically the Wicked Witch, and she's somehow affected in all these different stories. And so in the first book with Cinderella, it's about a cyborg girl, so she's half robot, half human, falling in love with the prince, and there's a lot more to it. Look, I know I don't normally film with my glasses and that it's super duper distracting, but like if I take them off right now, I can't see you. I can't see my list. Everything is blurry, and I don't have my contacts in because my eyes hurt, so apologies about that. Next up, we have The Liar's Knot. The Liar's Knot is the sequel to Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Kark, which is the pen name for the two authors. Oh my goodness, I always forget their names, but I'll pop it up somewhere on here. Mask of Mirrors was a story about a heist, sort of. It's kind of an infiltration, kind of a heist of this, they're two sisters, but specifically this one girl that we're following as she enters into high society and cons these people out of a lot of money. If you know anything about me, one of my favorite tropes is that I love poor people pretending to be rich people and specifically conning them out of their money, but doing whatever they need to do in that setting. I rated book 1 5 out of 5 stars. It was really slow for my personal taste, but I felt like the writing and the storyline and the twists and turns were there, and I really liked the world building, and I was super excited to see where it goes in book 2. The publisher did send me book 1 and book 2 as ARCs, and I reviewed book 1 on my channel, and you can watch that review here, or it might be here. I can never remember which corner it's in anymore. And I haven't gotten around to book 2 yet, but I'm so excited to be reading it. Don't look at me. This year, 2022, has been the year of like not being on top of things like I'd wish to be, but it's fine. Up next, I have Broken Web by Lori M. Lee. So this is the sequel to Forest of Souls, which I loved. It is categorized as a YA fantasy. I don't see any reason for it not to be called that, but it definitely didn't have the same like tropey vibes that a lot of YA fantasy has, which I think is why a lot of people didn't end up loving this book as much as I did. I rated book 1 5 stars. I read it in a single day. I am not moving on to book 2 simply because I read book 1 so long ago that I absolutely have to reread it. I can't tell you much about book 1, and I absolutely don't remember how it ends. So I want to reread book 1. hope to God that it still is a 5-star, and then continue on to book 2. But what I can remember about book 1 is that it is about 2 girls who are learning how to use magic, and there's this trial thing where one of them is supposed to go through it, and when she finishes, she's supposed to have an animal companion, and when she goes through the trial, her best friend, who is a human, ends up being her animal companion. But I think there's also something about like her best friend died in the trial process or something like that, and so they have to go off to this forest of souls where they're meeting like this spider king to like figure out their magic and everything. I remember it being dark. I remember the main character being asexual. I don't know if that is accurate or not, but it's somewhere in my memory. And I remember just really loving the story and not being able to put it down. Book 2's been out for a while, but when it was released, it was not released as an audiobook originally. It took a little bit for it to come out in audio format. So that is how I read book 1, and I was hoping that was how I was going to be reading book 2. So I had to wait too long, and then I forgot too much information. But now it is out on audio, and I'm hoping to pick it up just as soon as I can pick up book 1, honestly. Next up, I have When Villains Rise by Rebecca Schaeffer. This is actually the 3rd book in the series, and I read book 1 and 2, and I loved both of them. They're really hard to talk about because I feel like if I get into many details, it starts to spoil things, and I don't want you to be spoiled at all, but I loved these books. They're kind of a genre bend between fantasy, horror, contemporary, and dystopian, where there's a lot of paranormal creatures and there's a lot of blood and guts and gore in these books, but they are absolutely phenomenal. Our main girl is a legendary mythical creature, and there are these like mythical creatures all throughout the land who have humanoid shapes, and her mother is a bounty hunter who hunts down magical creatures, brings them back to her daughter dissects them, and then they sell their body parts on the black market. Our main girl kind of has a slip up at the beginning of book 1 and ends up on the black market herself, where she runs into some of the most terrible and worst monsters that she has ever faced. It is such a good book. There is a romance that runs throughout all of them. It's one of the few romances that I have actually like been super into. I think Rebecca did such a good job writing it. And I don't exactly remember what I rated book 1 and 2, but I know that both of them were over a 4.5 and that I consumed them. They have absolutely beautiful writing, absolutely amazing gray, morally gray characters. The love interest in the stories is such an interesting person, and I wish I could talk about him more, but he's a full spoiler because it's not who you think it's going to be, but his like magical creature ability is at such odds with so many things that happen in the book. It was just a good book. Like, I cannot recommend this series enough. I don't even know what to compare it to. It is such a unique story, but like it checked all of the boxes that I didn't even know I needed filled. Why have I not moved on to book 3? Simply because I haven't had time. It's on my list. Honestly, as soon as I get the next period where I'm like, oh, I have like 2 days where I'm free and I need an audiobook, I'm going to purchase it and I'm going to read it. Oh, maybe I should just do it this weekend. Maybe I should just do it this weekend. Next up, I have The Inadequate Heir by Danielle L. Jensen. So this is the 3rd book in the Bridge Kingdom series. This is a new adult smutty fantasy romance book series. Book 1 and 2 we're following 2 specific characters who get together, and then book 3 and 4 are going to follow 2 different characters in the same world at like a year later, I think it is. It's like in a very similar timeline. I think in total there's going to be 6 books in this series. I'm not 100% on that, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be 3 sets of duologies. So book 1, we are following this princess who has been trained her entire life to assassinate her future husband. And so she is married off to the king of this realm, and she's supposed to gather intel on him and then kill him. He lives in this bridge kingdom. It is this place where it is very inaccessible because you have to get to it by bridges, and so no one's been able to take them over. And so her father believes that if he raises his daughter to be like the perfect bride and then to steal all his secrets and kill him, that it'll be the way that he can take over this very lucrative land. Now, of course, our main girl goes there and starts to realize that maybe this land shouldn't be taken over. Maybe this king, my husband, is actually really hot. Maybe I should stick with him. The duology was really good. I think I rated book 1 4 stars and book 2 4.5 stars. And I've been really excited to read book 3, which I think is about the king's sister who is supposed to get married off to this other realm. The main reason why I haven't gotten to this one yet is because it increased significantly in length from the first 2. They're all on Audible. If you have an account, you can get all 3 of them for free. And I think they went from being like 10, 12 hours long to being like 19 hours long. And so I'm just a little bit nervous about picking it up, especially now that I'm having new characters. And for me, as a character-focused reader, characters can make or break a story. So even though I know I like this setting, I know I like this world, I know I like this writing, I could get in there and hate these characters and absolutely not want to read this book. We're gonna go back to old school once again, and we're gonna talk about Never Fade by Alexandra Bracken. So this is another YA dystopian story. I guess there are some fantasy elements, but it's mostly dystopian in my personal opinion. This is the sequel to The Darkest Minds, which I own book 1, but I don't know exactly where it is, so we're just not going to put it up. I've read The Darkest Minds twice, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it both times. One time when I was in the proper age demographic, one time when I was an adult and not in the proper age demographic for the book. But I thought it was really good both times. It's about the society where basically one day all children underneath a certain age developed abilities. And I don't remember how many there are, but each ability is broken down into a specific color. So there are greens, blues, yellows, oranges, and I think there's a 5th one, but I can't totally remember. Our main girl is one of the rarest and most dangerous types, but she has hidden that fact for years now, and she has been in this almost like a concentration camp for kids. They're trying to keep them away from society and adults and everyone else. And so they're locked up kind of in these cabins where they can, I think they like garden for their food and clean, and there's not much else they do. They're not allowed to leave or anything. The rebel organization comes and breaks her out, and when she is escaping, something happens and she gets separated from the person that is breaking her out, and she kind of has to survive on her own, but very, very quickly she runs into some kids who are loose in the wild and joins up with them, and they all hear about this magical place where kids live in peace, and they try to make it to that place. I actually did start Never Fade many, many, many years ago, but it was at the height of one of my depressive episodes. And so I made it a few chapters in and I DNF'd it because I wasn't into the change of setting, because where book 1 ends, book 2 picks up at a very, very, very different location than anywhere we have seen so far in book 1. And I think that if I am in the right mindset, that book 2 would be just as good as book 1. But I have always been too scared to pick it up again because I am nervous that maybe it wasn't me, maybe the book just wasn't great. Finally, we have a book on this list that is so old that I am going to have a hard time telling you exact details about book 1. And it is also a book that I have never ever heard anyone else talk about. Never in my life. Not on BookTube, not in life. Never. So the sequel that I'll be talking about is On the Shoulder of Titans by Andrew Rowe. The first book is called Sufficiently Advanced Magic, and I read this, oh my goodness, I think I might have read this in like 2016, 2017, so it's been 5-6 years now. I absolutely have to reread book 1. The things I remember about book 1 is there is a magical school where our main character is training to go into this tower, and he and like a group of other people, you can choose how many people you go with or you can go by yourself, are training to go into the tower because he believes that his brother is stuck or lost somewhere in the tower. And basically like each level of the tower is like a harder and harder task, and you're trying to get to the topmost level to like win. I don't remember what you win. I don't remember if his brother is actually up there or not. I don't remember much about this book. There's a very distinct scene stuck in my head of the boy and he's at this school, right? And the school's about to have this dance, and this other boy asks him to the dance, and I remember being like, this book is gay, and being so excited about it. I remember there being a huge twist as to who the villain is. I remember just being so surprised by how much I loved this book. I think I rated it 5 stars, but it's been so long I really don't know. It was such a good book. I should just pick it up this weekend. No, I'm gonna pick up When Villains Rise this weekend, not Sufficiently Advanced Magic. I don't even remember how long the audiobook is, to be honest. I did listen to it. The narrator, I remember him being very good. I can't remember who it is, but I remember him being a narrator who I've heard before. Okay, so the narrator is, I always forget how to say his name, but it's Nick Podell? Podell. He's narrated a couple of different fantasies that I have listened to, read through audiobook, and he always does a fantastic job. I think he did The War of the Wild, which I haven't read, but I think I'm getting that name right. Hold up. Let me just Google him. Okay, so he narrated Sephiroth's Hand, Forging Divinity, Free the Darkness. I have started all of those and finished 2 of them. He did The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear, which I have read. A Mark for Kings. I definitely thought he did. Fate of the Fallen. That's the book by Kel Cade he's narrated, not the wild one that I suggested. Unless he's done both. I'm not seeing it. Anyways, this book I absolutely recommend if you're into, it's kind of a mix between YA and adult. It has some themes from both, I would say. But if you're into just a generally good high magic fantasy book, this is a really good one. I definitely think it has some inspiration from D&D, but as I have never actually played D&D, I've only watched people play it. I can't be 100% sure that that is where he got his influence, but it definitely feels like it to me. Anyways, that's it. Those are the 10 books that I really need to read the sequels to. I hope I can get these read. If there's one on this list that you are more excited for me to read than the others, let me know down below. If there are books on this list that you're like, oh my God, I need to read them too, let me know down below. I hope I can get to all of these before the end of 2022. I'm hoping that by putting them on this list, it'll prioritize them above other books that I also want to read. I'm gonna go purchase When Villains Rise so that I can absolutely start it tonight. I hope you're having a great time. Thank you all for watching. I appreciate each and every one of you. I don't remember how my outro goes, but until next time, I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye!